So first of all, let me welcome you to Shafaqna's Roundtable, Dr. Alawi. I have the great pleasure of having you today to discuss history. Dr. Alawi, for our listeners, is a prominent historian on the Hijaz and the executive director of the Islamic Heritage Research Foundation. Dr. Alawi, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Marhaba, thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, it's our pleasure, I can assure you. I want to discuss with you, as I mentioned, Islam history and your work in historical preservation, and in particularly the work that you have done on Mecca, because a lot of the I would say our Islamic heritage has been disappeared in Saudi Arabia for to replace to be replaced with hotels or various I would say commercial buildings, and we have lost quite a lot of the patrimony that really made, I think, Islam so rich and multicolored. And today we almost losing this link that people have to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his family and his companions, and the history that echoed through the Hijaz at the time, and kind of allowed for people to understand not just who he was as a prophet and as a man, but as well to understand Islam and the history behind it. Because in the same way that we can't read the Quran, for example, and try to take it out of context, you have to read it as a whole body and try to understand the history, the context, of every surah, of every chapter. The same thing goes for history, I think. So if you could kind of tell me a bit more about your work, and the kind of destruction that has occurred in Mecca and Medina, over the past, I think maybe 2-3 centuries.
Um, yes, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Uh, we've had great tragedies in Mecca, which means that we have lost many of the monuments or historical heritage or the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Ahlul Bayt of the Prophet. And when I see seerah, there's two things Muslims should realize. Seerah is one is in the books, the seerah nabawiyah, and the seerah in the ground, in the soil. And what I mean by that, you can get seerah nabawiyah in hadith and many books in the historians. For example, where is Bayt al-Khatija, the house of Khatija? Where was Sayyidah Fatima born? Where did she live with Sayyidina Ali? Where were Hassan and Hussein born? And of course, many other companions and historians have this in texts. But the other part which I am concerned about is the seerah of the Prophet in the soil and the ground. That is being wiped away in Mecca, and in the 80s we excavated the house of Khatija, and that was of course below the ground surface of the Kaaba, just outside Bab al-Salam. And so if this house was going to be demolished and bulldozed, then we would not have any evidence of it. We will just have manuscripts or pages of saying this house, the house of Khadija, used to be in Mecca, in a particular area, but there will not be any proof. It will be a legend for the generations to come. What my concern is that if heritage is being systematically bulldozed, dynamited, taken away from the holy cities of, such as Mecca and Medina, the Muslim world should be very cautious. And the reason why I say it's cautious is because we will not have any identity left for Islam. You will have only the Quran and you will have the Hadith. And yes, you will have the family of the Prophet ﷺ, but you will not have anything where they lived. Where did the Islam start from the cradle of Islam, for example, in Mecca? But where did they migrate from? Where did they hijrah? Where did the Prophet ﷺ stay in the night to pray, to get victory for the Fatah Khandaq, or otherwise known as the Battle of the Trench? There is a mosque of Masjid al-Fatima and Masjid al-Ali and Masjid Abu Bakr, which was of course demolished deliberately several years ago, and to make way, so they said at that time, to make a better mosque, and the rest of the mosques which are standing there because the infrastructure was very weak. But what happened after that? After the Masjid Abu Bakr was demolished, they made a tailor machine, which is a cash point machine. Um, this is the idea that they have for the same for Sayyidina Ali, the mosque of Sayyidah Fatima. These are closed to the general public, by the way, and nobody has access to any of these mosques. They have been chained for the past 4 years. The municipality was questioned of Medina al Munawwara that why is these mosques not open to the public? Because, of course, the Prophet and his companion and his family had prayed at these locations in Medina at the Battle of the Trench. So it is a blessing for the people or the pilgrims to go and visit and pray two rakats there. However, because the Saudi authorities, as being Wahhabis, they consider this to be bid'ah and an invasion, you should not pray where the Prophet or his family or his companions have prayed, they should be locked up and demolished. What their reply was, why the municipality, that we have lost the actual key by the person who chained these mosques to the doors. The simple solution to that was, of course, if you have lost it, then you just go and cut the chains off and you repair the mosque instead of demolish them. They don't want to do that. And the simple answer to that is that we can't find the key. So they are still remain shut to the general public. Why is the Muslim Ummah, and I'm quite sensitive on this issue, why is the Muslim Ummah so concerned of Bayt al-Maqdis or Masjid al-Aqsa? I am very passionate of that, and I hope that it remains intact. But at the same time, Al-Aqsa, it is the only third holiest site in the Quran. The first and foremost is Mecca, then is Medina al-Munawwara, then it is, of course, Jerusalem. If Mecca does not remain as Mecca and it becomes a commercial city with skyscrapers springing up and tower of lights flashing like you are in a resort or so, and Medina Munawwara is to come the same way as what you see in Mecca. And by the way, when I say is to come, what you see in Mecca at the moment with the ugly clock tower, this is only 5% of what is to come in Mecca. It's only 5%. It's going to get much worse. Then they will phase into Medina. So the question to my listeners is that if Mecca and Medina do not remain, why worry about Jerusalem? That is, of course, under the rule of the Zionists. Mecca and Medina, of course, we say yes, they are the puppets of the Zionists, and we believe they are Wahhabis, and they accuse of mushriks, whatever. But the thing is, the Muslim world still has the power and the authority to deal with these tragedies in Mecca and Medina. Perhaps not so much in Jerusalem because of the influence of other countries with Jerusalem.
No, you make a very good point when you mention Jerusalem, because I mean, a lot of the time people are very interested in what happens there, but strangely enough, as you mentioned, nobody really cares about Mecca and Medina, even though, I mean, what's the point of having a Jerusalem if we're losing Mecca or Medina? And we have, I think, a very because there is a connection in between, history and identity, and I think that the Islamic world, especially today, with this rise in sectarianism and this issue that we have with terrorism, because we can't deny that even though it is absolutely true that those radicals do not represent or speak for Islam whatsoever, they're still claiming, to be under the banner of Islam, and claim to be speaking the truth. And the worry that I have is that because history is being wiped out in Saudi Arabia, in Yemen, for example, in Bahrain, in Iraq, in Syria, and all those countries which have a very deep connection with Islam, a very early connection to Islam, then what would be left to remember of the history of Islam, if not the one that, for example, Wahhabism is trying to impose on the rest of the world, claiming that only it speaks for Islam and on its behalf and for the Islamic world. I do believe, I don't know if you agree with me, that there's maybe kind of a nefarious agenda here at work where some powers are, quite keen on leveling, Islam's history so that they could raise their own house on top of it and maybe claim, absolutism over Islam and dictate to future generation what it is of the history that they ought to remember and what it is that they ought not to remember and not to ask question over. Because today there's been this debate, especially during the months of Muharram, regarding what points of history we are allowed to not debate, but kind of look into and ask questions, and try to identify maybe the why we are in the situation that we are in today, in regards to terrorism. And a lot of people have very, very strong arguments, preferring to kind of shut everybody down, saying that we're not allowed to talk about it. We should not talk about it ever, because it's going to upset certain dynamics. But then again, Islam is all about education, I believe, and about asking questions and allowing people to find their own answers. But this is me. I want to talk about your work of conservation and how you have been, I think, a pioneer in trying to, speak on behalf of Islam history, and trying to defend and protect the heritage that we have left. And as you mentioned, it's not much. What can people do, and how do you see moving forward, the efforts that we can do to protect history, to protect people's identity, and make sure that we have the space needed, for people to embrace pluralism and understand that Islam is still multicolored.
Okay, let me give an example that it is of Mecca, for example. It is the last remaining place that we have that proves of the Prophet Muhammad's existence as a physical fact. It is currently the library, and underneath that was the house of Sayyidah Amina, the mother of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And of course, this was for many years, it remained a cattle market area. And then, of course, it was changed so that the location can have some building built over it so that it stops further demolition in that area, which we lose the house where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born. Um, that happened, of course, almost 90 years ago. But however, the library sits on top of that location, and it is, as I said, the last remaining place where it gives the proof of the existence, the physical existence of the Prophet who was born. And it is, of course, under threat. If it is removed, and what they want to do, we would have created the last physical existence associated with this era of prophecy. And in the absence of historical evidence and physical remnants, the events and historical stories will take on a mythical dimension. Yes, there is a need for expansion in Mecca and Medina, but this is not at the cost of heritage. The most important thing that Muslims should realize that, as I mentioned, we have the Quran and we have the Prophet's family. But I face two arguments here with some of the Wahhabis and some of the Sunni ulama and some of the Shia. There is some difference of opinion, and we should not let our difference of opinion stop our aims and objectives to preserve the heritage. Now, my aim, and amongst many of the Shia academics that I have worked with, and we have done conferences together, even in London, we have agreed that we should stop every single destruction or demolition of any historical heritage site in Hijaz. It does not matter if it is what you call Muslim or non-Muslim. It should be protected. And we have some Sunni ulama who come and say, well, you cannot work with the Shia, and some of the extreme Shias, likewise, they have the problems. Now, I cannot say that we have, as you say in England, the birthplace of Shakespeare. No, the Catholics will not argue with the Church of England, and they will not argue with the opposite people that, oh, well, this belongs to us, or you should not protect it, or we should have this and this. Why does the Muslim Ummah divide when it is related to the seerah of the Prophet? Why do we fail to understand that it does not matter if it is Abu Bakr, or it is Ali, or it is Fatima, or Hassan Hussein? These are all leaders of Islamic era. And they are the Ahlul Bayt are an important part of the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let's put that aside, and this is what the Wahhabis are doing in the kingdom. They are trying to divide and rule. And there is, yes, some powers who want to dissolve the Islamic heritage and put their pinnacle on the point. Yes, I know for a fact that they are Freemasons who have established themselves in the kingdom, but we cannot blame everything on the Freemasons. That yes, it's the Freemasons who want to dismantle Mecca and Medina and the rest of the heritage. What my question here is, for what we have discovered and what I have reported in many of the newspapers in the United Kingdom, in the United States, in Egypt, and wherever, this has gone viral. The people who have come forward in the reaction to this in a positive way, in a positive reaction, have been the Shia Muslims. The Sunni Muslims have reacted in somewhat, and perhaps in India, in some parts of in Egypt, but the rest of the Sunni Muslims have been remained asleep, and they have not reacted to this, and they think that maybe Dr. Alawi has become very emotional. And I'll give you an example on this. 2 years ago, the Saudi government wanted to test the water, and they wanted to dismantle the parts of the sacred chamber where the Prophet ﷺ is resting amongst his two companions. One was to separate the Hujra Sharif from the chamber of Sayyidah Fatima, which has always been next to that area of the house of Aisha. None of the historians have ever dismantled this area or separated it. The other area that they wanted to demolish was the Green Dome. That has, as you know, it remains under threat for several centuries since the House of Saud has taken over.
Mm-hmm.
One of the academics of King Abdulaziz University wrote a paper, and the Royal Journal of the Kingdom published it. My question was, if you did not have any intentions of doing or even listening to the suggestion by this Wahhabi extreme academic, why did you publish it in your Royal Journal? The reason why they wanted to taste the water is once the extremist version of Wahhabism, ISIS or Daesh, was demolishing the shrines of the Ahlul Bayt and top great scholars in Syria and Iraq. They said, well, whilst the Shia and the Sunni Muslims is concentrating on that part of the world, let's see, whilst we are going to expand the Masjid al-Nabawi, let's see if we can do something to this, and maybe we will be successful. Of course, when this was published in the Royal Journal, I had the parts of the document, and I very quickly released it to the newspaper, the UK. When this went viral, of course, it was picked up by on Twitter and in the kingdom and on Facebook, and of course, we could understand that not every single person in the kingdom is Wahhabi. Mm-hmm. Many of the Wahhabis have gone abroad, they've become moderate, they're not extreme anymore. They understand that things have been preserved in America and in England and in Europe, so they have become civilized. So with that fear, the Saudis reacted very cautiously that this is going to be a backlash against the government, and we have to be very cautious what we are going to do. Now, my question here was that the Sunnis, some of them reacted, and majority of the Shias reacted, and they said this will never happen and we will never allow it. The people from America, for example, and this is there, right? It's Al-Maghribi Institute, which is a hardcore Wahhabi institute. It has produced great Wahhabi scholars, Sheikh Yasser al-Qadi, for instance, who claimed that he's not a Wahhabi anymore. He refuted that whatever I put in the newspaper was absolutely wrong, and the Saudi government would never dare to demolish this. And the cleric who submitted his idea was just an opinion. Well, I'm not interested in his opinion. My question here is that how dare he give his opinion to demolish the Green Dome? How dare he give the opinion to dismantle the sacred chamber which has been up there for centuries? No one dared in history, the companions, to dismantle this. Now, if this was to happen, as an example in the Vatican, the Catholics will react very fearlessly. Mm-hmm. If this was to happen to Big Ben or to the White House, the world would react. Why did they say that just because it was an opinion of this Wahhabi academic, it does not matter? So the matter was put down and everyone forgot about it. After 2 years, it has reacted again. Saudi Arabia still is thinking of doing what they want, and I have all the blueprints and the plans of this. What they want to do is, as you know, when you visit Medina, the sisters are accommodated at 3 times to visit the Riyadh al-Jannah, the green carpeted area, not so close to the sacred chamber, but they can pray their Nawafila prayers and so forth, and salutations to the Prophet ﷺ there. Now, there are times which is after Dhuhr, afternoon prayer. Then you have after the morning prayer, Fajr, and then one it is the last one, which is the after midnight prayer. This area is open. Now, once the new expansion of the Prophet's mosque is completed, what the Saudi authorities want to do is implement the same timing for the males. So where the males continuously sit around the green carpeted area, Riyadh al-Jannah, or the near the sacred area of Masjid al-Nabi, these males will be blocked off. They will be asked to go and sit in the new area, and you will be only allowed to be coming visiting the Prophet when you're offering your salams and salutations to the Prophet when the mosque is remain open for those particular period. Otherwise, to remain in that area, it's bid'ah, it's shirk, because you're praying towards the Prophet, you're raising your hands, you're raising your salutations. Are we going to allow the Saudi authorities to do this? Because, look, for almost 15 years, I was saying, and I had the blueprints, and I was showing on my lectures the clock tower is to come. When they demolished the Ottoman fort, the Kala, in the Ajiyad, no one believed me. They saw the blueprint and they thought maybe this is just a hearsay, I have exaggerated, but the clock tower is there. What can the Muslim world do now about the clock tower? Nothing. Are we going to do the same with Masjid Nabawi when they've expanded and said, okay, this is the times for the males to visit and you can't visit the Prophet ﷺ, just like the females? Are we let them do that and then cry over it? We can't do nothing then.
Well, I hope it doesn't come to that. I really hope so, because there is not even a justification, for what it is that they do. Because I know that a lot of the time they're saying that they need to expand, and yes, I think that people can understand that, but not to the detriment of our heritage, because it makes no sense whatsoever, especially when Al Saud family claims to be the holy custodian of the two holy mosques. Then how can you go about and literally take a sledgehammer to Islam itself? Because if you are denying its history, and preventing, people from enjoying this link that people need to have with history, something that they can touch, something that they can see and visit, as you mentioned before, it becomes a fairy tale. And it becomes, Islam would become very, I think, empty of certain substance, because then people would lose that connection. And connection is very important. Not everyone has the ability to, to be so spiritual that they don't need to have a physical reminder, or some kind of a conduit, to carry their faith. It would be nice if we were like this, but we're human, and we do need to be reminded sometimes, and we do need to have monuments. We do need to have places of worship for that reason. But I think that's all we have time, today to kind of discuss. So I wanted to thank you very much, Dr. Alawi, and I hope that we can discuss this further, because it's a very, very important subject. And I'm very grateful for your efforts, and I wish you all the success in the world.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.